Review from their view.
You touched on this a little bit, but considering the U.S. doesn't really have a national policy to deal with nuclear waste, I mean, what do you think of the long-term viability of nuclear?
I don't think there's any question that we have to include nuclear power as part of our inventory of assets when it comes to long-term solutions to our energy problems. But clearly, until we get our arms around a solution that will deal with the problem of nuclear waste, we're going to be fighting this battle with one arm tied behind our back. As you know, the Congress and others identified a site in Nevada which was not acceptable to the majority leader in the Senate, his state, and therefore there's been no funding, no expenditures, no effort being made on the Yucca Mountain site, which was originally chosen by the Congress. And it's in the courts, and the courts have said that the administration has acted improperly in failing to go forward with this, the congressional direction. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. You're right, it does play a very important part in determining whether we're going to have a future as a country that can take advantage of our resources in the nuclear area.
35 years later, why important to still talk about the incident that happened here? Why is it something that needs to be discussed in your eyes?
Well, we learn from our experiences, whether they're individual or collective. And this is an example, I think, of where people can look at the collective experience of those people who were in government, out of government, of the scientific community, lay people, because the next time we're going to have a challenge. It's not going to be like 3 Mile Island. As I said, the first and most important lesson for anyone in government to learn from an experience like this is to expect the unexpected. And then you'll be equipped to handle anything that comes down the pike. And I think a lot of the things that have been brought by people who are here today, experts and experienced people in the field, incrementally they make a big difference in our capability to respond to these types of things.
What do you think the largest impact we still feel today, in terms of maybe even
Of the
regulation, or as far as the incident that happened, as far as maybe the trickle to this day, as far as impacts,
Yeah.
be it area, federal regulations? What do you kind of see as?
I think there are probably 3 areas that command our attention nowadays. First is the solution to the nuclear waste problem, which has been compounded by the administration's unwillingness to follow the law passed by the Congress. Second is the need to apply the lessons learned from previous experiences of the type that I mentioned during my remarks here today. And thirdly is to assert and assume our worldwide leadership in this area, because nuclear energy was first invented here in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh. And all of the developments, both in the Navy and in weaponry that have followed, depended upon our Pennsylvania ingenuity.
The current decommissioning plan calls for the site to be fully cleaned up and restored by 2054. That's 75 years after the accident. Are you surprised that it's dragging on this long?
I don't know enough to be surprised or not surprised. All I would say, get it done.
It calls for the waste, though, to be entombed at the site, which is in
Yeah.
an island in the middle of the Susquehanna River and drains into the Chesapeake.
Well,
do you think that's, I mean, as we talked about, there's nowhere to take the waste.
Any plan that puts people at risk and puts their health in harm's way ought to require very careful scrutiny. I'm not intimately familiar with the current status of the proceedings with regard to TMI, but in general, my sense of the need for extraordinary care and determining the facts and making the decisions it carries over in spades when you're talking about something that has a profound effect upon life and health in the
So
area.
you think it's probably wrong to keep it on the site as a general?
I can't make that
Yeah.
judgment. I don't have the technical expertise, but there are a lot of people out there trying to deal with this problem, and sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail, but isn't that the way with all of us? So.
Governor, were there heroes and were there villains in this?
Well, the heroes clearly were Harold Denton and his colleagues. because they had the ability, they not only understood the technology, they had the ability to communicate it in plain English to people like myself who have no background in nuclear technology. So he stands head and shoulders in my mind. And I would give President Carter some credit as well, because he didn't have to come up here and give the kind of reassurance that was inherent in his presence here, but he was here. I was grateful for that. Villains, it's kind of hard to pick out folks who made mistakes or erred in their judgments about the facility. They were all trying to do a good job down there, and nobody was involved in any criminal enterprise or anything. So I think we all ought to take a deep breath and a pass on that question and look instead to the inspiration that comes from people who did do their job and did preserve the health and safety of the people of this area.
What's lacking now in terms of maybe preparedness or regulations, if anything, at this point as it relates to nuclear energy? Do you think anything is at this point?
Solution to the problem of nuclear waste has to be at the top of anybody's to-do list when it comes to ensuring that we're going to have a vital nuclear energy industry that can contribute to our further economic growth. No question about that.
You think Yucca Mountain's the right place for waste?
I don't want to, those are policy decisions. The Congress thought it was. That's the important thing. Congress passed legislation that said that Yucca Mountain was a suitable site, and the administration simply chose not to fund it. So that's...
Somewhere. Put it somewhere.
Going back 35 years ago, you were a new governor, you said you were focused on the budget. What was it like to get that phone call at 7:50 in the morning?
Chilling. The fact that somebody felt they needed to disturb my political efforts at the breakfast for Democratic legislators at the governor's residence raised it pretty high on my chart of concerns. And but once again, I mean, I have to emphasize how much it takes to bring together the resources and get the points of view, accurate points of view and assessment of what's going on before you're ready to act. I mean, most of the criticism that we took during this event related to a reluctance to act or a failure to act, for very good reason. The people who wanted to urge me to order a complete evacuation of this area. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of people, some of them in automobiles that are not totally trustworthy, and frankly, drivers that are not totally, particularly when they're panicked by something. And when you think of the number of people that are non-ambulatory that would have to be moved out of this, is babies in incubators or elderly folks unable to get around without aid or assistance. Everybody's in potential jeopardy. So
your initial reaction was to cover your bases, get the facts, make sure before you made a call it was accurate, right?
Good. Did you work for a governor once? That's exactly right.
You said nuclear should stay part of our energy
Yeah.
portfolio, so do you think it's a safe technology?
I would want to insist that people who know their business certify that it's safe. We did that. I'll tell you what we did during the 3 Mile Island incident, which is not newsworthy, but it is of interest, I think. We had to release some krypton gas from the site down there, and there was a big back and forth and a hoo-ha about how we should do it. And finally, we asked the Union of Concerned Scientists, the most anti-nuclear responsible group in the country, to advise it. And they took a look at this plan, finally came back and said, it's all right, it's not going to hurt. And that made a world of difference. It established our credibility as being willing to listen to the points of views of other people, but it also set the bar a little bit higher for those people who wanted to criticize as a knee-jerk reaction to most everything that came down the pike. So,
in the remaining years you've had as governor, what do you think were some of the most important steps you took after this to try to improve the state's response to large-scale emergencies?
Get the money. We had about $1.5 billion in unfunded liabilities for the cleanup. Nobody wanted to pay for the cleanup. And I spent hours, days, months during the immediate 2 or 3 years after the accident, going around with a tin cup trying to get some money. And the irony of it is that we got a major boost from Japan, which gave us $18 million toward the cleanup of 3 Mile Island. And I thought, how ironic that the next time that I was to deal with the Japanese on these issues, it was over their own nuclear disaster, which was far more serious than what happened here at 3 Mile Island, except for the fact that there was some precedent to look to. But it's eternal vigilance is necessary here to ensure that we have people well-trained, properly motivated, protected in an environment that doesn't admit terrorists and the like, to look after our well-being and to add to our economy. I mean, if we can fold in an appropriate, we have about 20% of our power comes from nuclear nowadays, and that addition is just if that portion is just maintained, you're making a real contribution toward economic stability.
What goes through your head March 28th every single year?
Yeah, same old, same old.
Anything that
It's like
sticks out
Bill
in
Murray, the Groundhog Day.
Does it all come back to you? Does it really all?
Oh yeah, you don't forget something like that. I mean, usually one of the first things you do in government of any kind, in fact, or in industry, whatever, you go to people who have had the same experience that you're looking at and say, how'd you handle this? Wasn't anybody around to talk to for us because this had never happened before. And of course that gave rise to this cottage industry of people who were full of tales and exaggeration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.